Welcome to the Stray Pointers podcast, where seemingly ordinary people join us for extraordinary discussions. You're watching Season 3, Episode 8 of the Stray Pointers podcast. This episode was recorded on August 4th, 2025. I'm your host, Jim Lawless. For more information about the show, including the show notes for this episode, please visit straypointers.com. Joining the show tonight is the creator of the first commercial C compiler for microcomputers, Leor Zolman. Leor, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Hey, Leor, we've got a bit to cover. You've got quite a history in tech, but I think we would benefit from kind of a summary of the Leor Zolman life story, if you could give us that.
I'll be glad to, and a lot of it can be seen just by viewing my VCF talk from 4 months ago, which the link will be available somewhere. I understand. I was born in Los Angeles to a pair of Holocaust survivor parents, only child, and childhood was very weird. It wasn't really until like 7th grade when I started junior high that I started to feel somewhat normal. Little did I know what was coming later on, but it felt good. Going through junior high with the same kids was great because earlier I'd been yanked around from elementary school to elementary school, and it was kind of destabilizing. So junior high was my stabilization time. Hollywood High, 1972, I believe, and I discovered programming. So at that point, I needed something to really focus my energy on, and that became it. About 6 years of learning how to code and putting together my machine, my IMSI 8080 box, and doing everything with that. And then when the opportunity came, this was after I had dropped out of MIT in 78 and went to work at a lab there. And it was a Unix lab. And they had a C compiler there, and I'd never seen C before. And I thought, yeah, this is a cool thing. I'd love to have it running on my hobby machine at home. And essentially, I made that happen, and with a lot of help from all the folks in that lab who just happened to want a C compiler that would run on their 8-bit machines that Heath Zenit had given everybody. So there was just some synchronicity there. As they needed it, I felt like writing it, and they were happy to have me do that while I was technically employed to do other stuff. And then BDSC became real. It took about 5 months to write it. And honestly, when I wrote it, my plan was nothing more than I'd publish the source code in Byte, or which is totally ridiculous, but that's as far as I thought it through. And then when it was actually working, a friend suggested, why not sell it? And thought about that and go, if I sold it, I could quit my job and just play with the compiler all day. So I did that. It became popular. 2 years of getting folks access to a C compiler that might not have had one that was that friendly to use. It wasn't a complete implementation. It was stripped down to fit the 8-bit environment it was in. That was very important to me to have the right subset so that it would be fast and also useful. And I think I kind of achieved that. It could have been a little bit better in a couple of ways had I been a little bit more more of an actual compiler writer instead of just figuring it out by the seat of my pants. But it worked out okay. And everything was fine. A couple of years into its life on the market, I was working with my friend Ed Ziemba on the Mark operating system. And right before it was due to be released, and Mark was a Unix-like system that ran under CPM parasitically, it would boot up under CPM, kick CPM out of memory, take over. We had an emulator that would run any off-the-shelf CPM software under Mark. It was beautiful. And a month before we were ready to basically announce it, Ed died in a freak accident. I couldn't deal with that. Um, so about 5 years were lost there, and I didn't really know why I was having a hard time. I would find out later on, but got married, had kids, settled down, and switched over into a training career for the next 35 years. And that ended about a year ago. So
And and so then your adult daughter had a surprise for you.
my adult daughter, Katie, had a tough time after she graduated from college, and we didn't really know why. Um, Kind of holed up in her room doing her art. She's an artist, and
Hmm.
she's definitely did some artwork, but it she wasn't really independent. And after about 8 years of this, she figured it out on her own with her therapists that she's autistic. So when she told us that, we went, "Wow." So what's it like to be autistic? And she'd list, all of the characteristics, and each one of them I'd be thinking, "What's unusual about that?" And doesn't everybody have that? And problem understanding social cues. Yeah, of course. Isn't that really hard to do? After about three or four of these, the light bulb went on in my head, and so 2 years since then of discovering how my own autism affects me and has affected me, and it's been a whirlwind. And I thought that was, the 800-pound gorilla in the room that made my life so
Hmm.
strange.
Hmm.
And that was a good story for a while until a few months ago when I realized, oh, there's war. And so now I'm in the midst of dealing with the trauma, really, that was part of growing up with Holocaust survivor parents. And I knew that there was a lot of pain there, a lot of trauma, but I didn't realize I could do something about it and that it was affecting me as much as it had. So that's my life right now, is just understanding that, really getting to know who I am. It sounds trite, but man, in this particular case, that is what's going on.
Okay, so we've set the stage now for who is Leor Zolman. And I have to ask, am I pronouncing your name right?
It's funny because there's two perfectly reasonable pronunciations. It's actually an Israeli name, and the actual pronunciation is Leor. Okay, it's hard to pronounce. And nobody wants to say that. So, and plus, when my parents were mad at me, they go, Leor. Okay, so I didn't like that pronunciation, and I just decided to call myself Leor, and pronounce accent on the first syllable. But now I go to a gym, and the guy's half Jewish, and he likes to call me Leor, and I'm getting used to that. And that is the actual pronunciation of the name. So most of the time now, I actually introduce myself that way, but I'm both. Ambidextrous name-wise, sort of.
Okay, good to know. Okay, so that was quite a story. I want to take a step back and let's talk about the technical aspects. So in high school, you ran across computers. What were some of the first computers and first programming languages you dealt with?
HP 2000C Time Shared Basic was the first. The LA City school system had downtown server and teletype ASR 33s in all the schools, or a lot of them anyway. So we had
Now,
two teletypes.
was this a
First week of
formal
school,
was this a formal
pardon?
class?
No. Um, I guess eventually there was a programming class. I actually taught it with the teacher when it happened, because at that point I knew about as much as he did. But um, no, it was just the math department, and there was a couple, three classrooms, and the teletypes were like one in each of the rooms, and you can have two in the same room. And there's a bit about this in the VCF talk, and I don't want to spoil it.
Hmm.
You can check that out. Um, but I said, "What's that noise?" And walked in the room, and I was smitten. That was it. I ordered the manual, and that was a treasure. And I learned about all the commands, and writing basic programs and that play games like craps, various card games, and then standing back and watching the other students playing the games.
Hmm.
It was pretty satisfying.
So what was your first personal computer?
My first personal computer, it was an HP calculator that actually had programming steps, I guess. I guess you can't really call that a computer. Um, but the first real computer was the MSI. Um,
Okay.
my high school physics teacher worked at the second computer store, I think, in California. The first was the computer store in Santa Monica. They sold Altairs. This was the Computer Mart in Orange County, and they sold IMSIs. And so I was sold my IMSI kit and taught how to solder by my high school physics teacher. I was a senior at that point, and he was a 24-year-old Cal State Northridge physics student, and he was into this stuff. And um, yeah, so learned how to solder to put that sucker together, and somehow it ended up working after some adventures. But
So,
it
so at
ended up
that
being the machine I wrote BDSC on eventually.
at that point, did you have to learn assembly language, or did you have basic for it? Did you have full CPM for this?
Full CPM, and I kind of learned to despise Microsoft because my first exposure to Microsoft was when they were selling their like 4 or 8K MITS Basic for about the same price I paid for my MSI. It didn't seem right. And I said, when I had an opportunity to actually put out a software package, it was my absolute desire to not make it dependent on anything Microsoft. So all you needed to run BDSC was an off-the-shelf basic CPM 80 distribution, which comes with ASM, I believe, the assembler. And that's all you needed to do anything with BDSC. The assembly language mechanism I created to write functions in assembly language worked just with ASM. And if you have ASM, you were golden and you didn't need anything else.
Okay. So then post high school, you headed for MIT. Was that something you had planned on doing? Is it something you kind of accidentally fell into? How'd you end up at MIT?
Well, it was pretty clear by the time I was looking at colleges that I wanted to go into computer science. So kind of figure out where's the best places to go. I applied to two schools, Cal, no, yeah, Cal State Northridge and MIT.
Okay.
Is it Northridge? No, no. I'm sorry, not Northridge. The one that's like in the Bay Area. There's a Cal State. Anyway, my mom was a UCLA professor, so applying to a UCLA, to a California school seemed like a good thing. And ironically, the first response I got was the um, from the California school I applied to, and I got rejected. Oh, it was Berkeley. I think it was Berkeley. Sorry, UC Berkeley.
Okay.
And they rejected me. And now I'm going, huh? All I've got is my MIT application. Nothing else. They did accept me at MIT. And the ironic thing is that my mom, when she heard I got rejected, I don't know, she yelled and screamed and they reversed it. Apparently, they were just rejecting most applications without reading them at the time because there were too many applications. I don't remember all the story, but it
Hmm.
was kind of scary. But yeah, having done some pretty serious work already during high school, working for a hospital in LA, I think I aced the MIT application and yeah. It was
Okay.
good. MIT was wonderful. It was the people there. Just got so much out of it. Not so much the courses, but absolutely
Okay.
the people. Yeah.
Okay. But then you had decided to discontinue going and you ended up at a
Uh,
job in the computer lab.
right. So I dropped out middle of my junior year. I felt I was wasting my dad's money, is what was happening. Um, there were so many requirements. I mean, you couldn't just do computer science. It was electrical engineering and computer science, course six.
Hmm.
I did not care about electrical engineering, but I had to do this stuff. And then like economics, I guess I wasn't very creative in choosing my curriculum because I bored myself to death and hardly even got to any of the computer science courses. I never did take a compiler course. So I just withdrew kind of to see what I really wanted to do. I planned to go back in a year, but instead, Joe Eisenbaum, the author of Eliza, which just had its like 50th anniversary recently,
Hmm.
he was my advisor, my undergraduate advisor,
Oh, very
and there
cool.
was an opening for a system administrator on a Unix system on a PDP 1170 running Unix version 7. And I took it because I thought it'd be fun. And the rest is history. I learned C really soon after that, started just messing with C, and pretty soon BDSC came along.
Okay. Now, before we get into that, There's a story about you writing Conway's Game of Life in assembly language, yes?
Machine language, even. I'm not sure
Okay.
I had an assembler yet at that point. Um,
Okay.
but the funny story behind that is that when you buy an MSI 8080 kit, you got power supply, the frame, backboard, the back plane,
Hmm.
front panel board, and CPU board, and that's it. There's no RAM, no video card, no I/O. All you had was front panel, CPU board. So that's all I could afford. And after putting that together, what was the fastest way I could actually use it for something? So what I did is I bought a processor technology VDM1 video card, had 1K of static RAM that was memory mapped to a 64 by 16 display, which was a little 9-inch Sanyo monitor connected by a coax cable to the card.
Hmm.
And the cool thing about the VDM1 is it had a software programmable blanking register. So it had 16 lines and you can selectively blank like some portion of those lines. So I blanked those lines, I coded in that memory, and the output was the other part of the screen where it was actually going to be visible.
So you had no
And
room
that
for
was my
the
first.
you had no room for the code, so you stuck it in half of screen RAM.
I had no RAM except the 1K on the video card.
Okay.
That's all the RAM I had. Might as well program in it. Um, it worked. And it was in that environment, I believe, that I was playing with the VDM and I decided to write. I'd read about the game of life in
Hmm.
Scientific American,
Hmm.
and it's a really simple thing to implement. So I just implemented it where you use the M-size toggle switches to do it. So, you flip a switch and a thing moves, and you flip another switch, it moves the other way, and you flip
Hmm.
another switch, it deposits a person there. And then when you're done, you flip a switch and it goes, really fast. And when I had that working, I thought this is a cool thing on the VDM1. I'll just send it to processor tech. I don't think I actually had any kind of a deal or expectation, as I recall. I mean, my memory's hazy, but I think I just wrote it and sent it to them, and they send me like a 4K RAM board or an 8K RAM board or something. It was like, wow, yes.
Very good. Okay.
So I don't know if that ever got published or used internally or whatever they did with it.
Okay. Okay. Sorry for that little detour. So you're back at the lab. You've taken an interest in C. What made you want to write your own compiler?
Well, there was a implementation of a not very high level, but it did work game of Othello, the game of dramatic reversals where
Hmm.
you flip tiles. Um, it was written in C by a fellow there in the lab, Bert Halstead, and I played it, and it played a valid game. It didn't play a great game, and I wanted that to run on my machine at home, and so I spent, I don't know, a couple of days doing half the process of actually converting that from C to 8080 assembly language. And after about, a day and a half of this, I just stopped and I said, what am I doing? This is absolutely boring. What am I going to accomplish? It'd be more fun if I could write a compiler that could actually compile this. And I looked at the features that Othello used, and though that feature set sort of became the foundation of VDSC, and I realized that what I consider fun in coding is the logic, not the number crunching, the logic. If I left out floating point, if I left out 32-bit types and just limited it to ints and chars, signed, unsigned, yeah, um, I might be able to make it actually friendly in a, you know, 8080 based CPM machine with 24 to 32K of RAM, which is kind of typical.
Hmm.
Um, and it just started, the idea started going through my head. I think a friend of mine actually suggested I write a C compiler before I'd ever even thought of it. I have this friend who's really smart. He thinks of stuff. He's filthy rich, lives out in California, was a mogul. But at the time, he's just another fellow student there. And he goes, why don't you write a C compiler? And I go, oh, yeah, right, C compiler. And then, but
So,
that stuck in my head, and eventually I ended up doing it, but it was a scale down. I didn't think I could do it if it was a full implementation, but a scaled down version, carefully sort of balanced, that had potential, and I
well,
I
you went from enough to compile Othello to something that was a little more general. What spurred you to go ahead and generalize it and make a complete C product out of it?
it was really fun writing it, and if I were to turn it into a commercial product, I could do nothing but play with it for some number of years. That was basically my mindset.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
So you got a C compiler now. Now you've got to become a businessman, right? You've got to form some sort of a corporate entity. You've got to market it. How did all this happen?
I did the absolute minimum I could possibly get away with in business. I really viewed myself as like an author, and I would have a publisher, and I would just, I'm the talent. I would do the thing, and then
Hmm.
somebody else would take care of all the busy work and distributing it for me on 87 different disk formats. Um,
But you
so I didn't
formed
really want anything to do with the business end of it. I
you formed
initially,
you formed was brain damage software the the BD
just me.
and BDSC,
Yeah.
but was that an actual corporation? Was that a limited liability
For a
company?
short time, I think it was incorporated, and we decided there was no benefit to it.
Okay,
But it just needed a name. So I didn't want to call it Leor Zolman's C compiler. It just seemed
sure,
kind of weird. So
sure.
once somebody had written, okay, so in my dorm there was a fellow whose name was Wolfgang, but we called him Puppy Dog. And so one day somebody on my whiteboard on my dorm room wrote brain damage, and then I became BD. And Puppy Dog was PD. I became BD. So
Okay,
that was kind of my nickname. And when I needed a name for the company, I just, let's call it BD Software. And that was it.
very good, very good. Okay, so you got a publisher and you as a if I recall, you had some friends in high places at Byte Magazine that kind of helped publicize this. A couple of one science fiction author.
Yeah. So let's see. So Jerry Purnell had his column called Computing at Chaos Manor,
Hmm.
and he had heard about BDSC and somehow had connected with me, or I connected with him. I don't remember how we initially made contact, but I lived, 20 minutes from his house. So I ended up visiting him, helping him, I think, write a driver for a printer that he was trying to make work with something from the C compiler. Um, I just remember it was a little bit of a challenge. It took me about an hour, but I finally did get it working, and I think that impressed him. So he started writing about BDSC and in his column, and he said really nice things about it, and and he became a friend. So
Now,
I
did
still
that
have my
have?
signed copy of Lucifer's Hammer that he and Larry Niven both
Oh,
signed for me
sure,
when Larry
sure.
came
That's
over
a
one
great
day.
book too.
Uh,
Um, it now was it already selling very well before Purnell started writing about it? Did his column have any boost to the sales, anything
Oh,
like that?
I'm sure it helped a lot. I'm sure it helped a lot. I did no market research whatsoever. When it hit the market, I figured, oh, well, I got to have an ad so people
Hmm.
know it exists.
Hmm.
So I used some New York ad agency. They said, what's good about it? Well, it's fast. Oh, there we go. It'll save time. So the ad had a big picture of a clock. Save time. Wow. Okay. It was really, the ads were really just to show this exists. And it's a real product and you can buy it here. It's kind of like, that was the purpose of the ads. And I actually liked to support all the computer magazines, so I put ads in the ones I liked. And I never did any sort of, metrics to know if the ads helped at all. I just decided that was my way of giving back. People were trusting me buying my software. So I'll give back to the industry. I'll buy advertising.
Okay, okay. Now, um, then you were busily selling this, and then you worked on the Mark OS, and then after your friend's death, you kind of wanted to get out of the
Well, it's
computer
not
game.
wanted, and I was not capable of doing anything at that point.
Okay.
I did the bare minimum to keep BDSC providing income.
Hmm.
I absolutely fixed bugs and made the existing framework as solid as I could.
Hmm.
And as far as I know, it was pretty darn solid. I don't know of any bugs in it, nor does this fellow who actually translated it all to Z80 and said he found no bugs in the process, which I thought was pretty cool. Um,
Before we wander away from BDSC, can you tell me, were there any interesting stories about support calls or anything like that from those days?
I, of course, did all my own support. If somebody calls the support number, it's my personal number. And people were sometimes rather surprised when that happened. So it was always kind of fun.
Hmm.
Pick up the phone, BD software. Um, I may have had a separate number.
Hmm.
I actually think I had two numbers. I had my personal number and the business number. Okay,
Hmm.
probably. I did later for sure. Back initially, I may not have even, but that was always the fun part. But I did have like one really cool experience and one really bad, and that's it. And everybody else was wonderful and nothing unusual. The good experience. I'll only do the bad experience. One day I got a call from it was a kid, not a little kid, but kind of like maybe 13, 14 years old. I'm guessing because
Hmm.
it was just that one call. I never contacted him again or vice versa. But he called and said, "Oh, I got a bug to report." And I said, "Oh yeah, oh great, thanks." Got ready to write it down. That's
Hmm.
what people do. They call, give me bugs. I fix it and send them the fixed version. And so I'm ready to record it. And he goes, so how what am I going to be paid for telling you about this bug? So
Wow.
nobody had ever asked me that before.
So you guys invented the bug bounty too, then?
I didn't.
Well, he was
This
trying
this
to.
kid may have. And I'm just like, huh, what do I do? Do I offer him money? No, I don't want to offer him money. I sold the compiler for $100
Hmm.
so that people could afford it. Um, I'm not making that much. I mean, it was supporting me
Hmm.
and it was nice for a little while, but I wasn't filthy rich from it. And I just said, I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to pay anything. And I basically said what I just said to you, but to him. And like his dad came on and tried to tell me I should pay him. And I just said, no. So they hung up and that was it. And I never did find out what his bug was, but since there's supposedly no bugs now, got fixed eventually, I hope. So that was the horrible. So now let me tell you the good one.
Okay.
And this warms my heart every time I think of it. And it'll seem a little strange, but to me it was like wonderful. I think it was an email I got from a guy with a Russian name, and he writes me to apologize that he had gotten a bootleg copy of VDSC because he was behind the Iron Curtain, and there was no legitimate avenue to buy the product
Hmm.
legitimately. So
Hmm.
the only way to get it is to bootleg it. And if you had looked at the code, I mean, I had some little Easter eggs like right at the beginning of the executable for the compiler. If you use the type command, and you say type, cc.com,
Hmm.
the binary file, of course, but the first 3 bytes are just a jump, and then there's a bunch of text. So the text shows up and it says, you know, copyright blah 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 by Leor Zolman. Please don't rip me off. That's what it says in there. And occasionally people comment that they've seen it. Um, and I suspect he may have seen it too and felt bad. So he's writing me to actually apologize for ripping it off, and that just warmed my heart. And I replied to him saying, "Absolutely no problem. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, that really makes me feel good that you got the use out of it, and then that you're actually willing to come and tell me about it. And I just think it's cool that it made it behind the Iron Curtain, and that's one of the fun things from that whole deal."
Sure. Okay. So as you're sort of moving out of the software development uh, era of the Leor Zolman story, you you started to get into writing for involvement with tech publications. How did that come about?
So my first publications were just stuff I'd been doing on my IMSci. I have a article in my favorite bike issue cover ever, the one with the train. I have an article in there.
Hmm.
Um, that was actually, no, that was later on. I'm confusing two different things. So I think I had two things in bike, and one of them was the train cover, and the other one was maybe another one. Um, Dr. Dobbs in the early days. Um, I learned some lessons too. Like there was something called Palo Alto Tiny Basic, a little basic interpreter that had been published in Dr. Dobbs. And when you run it, you can enter a program, but then it goes away. There was no persistence, no
Hmm.
saving feature.
Hmm.
So I've been using the Tarbell cassette interface at home with my IMSci, and I figured why not? And I wrote a set of load and store routines that worked with the Tarbell cassette interface for that. And I wanted to publish it. So I looked around where to publish it, and my first thought was just Dr. Dobbs, but then somebody pointed out that Interface Age, which was a sort of commercial successor to the SCCS Interface magazine from the Southern California Computer Society, which was just the club magazine. They turned it into something that they pay money and it's more commercial.
Hmm.
And I saw, and they bought the article from me, and then they killed it. So they sat on it for like 8 months, a year, and it never got published. Finally, they said, "We're not going to run it. You can go. You're free to send it somewhere else." So at that point, a year had gone by, and I submitted to Dr. Dobbs, and they publish it. And the lesson there was, you know, don't be greedy. It was more important for me to get for the software to be out there, and I figured, oh, well, I can get some money or not some money. I'll do the money, and then it ended up being not a good thing.
Hmm.
So that sort of you know, set set my mindset for my values moving forward. But I like to write about the stuff I did. If I thought somebody else could make use of it, I was motivated to write a little piece about it and
Hmm.
publish it somewhere. Um,
Now, the BDSC compiler had its own newsletter, yes?
so the story with that is there's a guy in Florida who started a newsletter for it and he ran out of time. So another fellow named Robert Ward out in Kansas um, took on that newsletter and then turned it into the C users or the C users journal, I believe it was called originally.
Hmm.
That was a Slick magazine. And it was right around the time the C users journal was starting to become successful that I ended up chatting with Robert, and we decided I would try working for him. I liked him a lot. I needed a change of venue. I needed a reset, and that just was great. The part that made it a little tricky is I had just gotten married a month before, and we were living in Cambridge, Mass.
Hmm.
And my wife had no clue I might all of a sudden want to relocate to Kansas.
Hmm.
But we survived. Turns out Kansas is a great place to have kids. We had both our children there. And my son was 3 weeks old when we moved back to the Boston area, which we're in the same house now that we moved back into in 92.
Okay.
But Kansas was actually a wonderful experience. Great barbecue, but working with Robert, for Robert in that little company, that was the only experience I've really had of working in a company and feeling like really that there was a good mesh of talent there,
Hmm.
doing something really cool.
Hmm.
And so, and that was great. And after those 3 years, it's like that was enough because as I would find out later, doing stuff socially was difficult. But I didn't know that at the time. But now autism does make certain kinds of collaboration harder. And that's why I've always kind of gravitated toward being a lone wolf and doing stuff myself, whether it's coding,
Hmm.
teaching, 35 years of training. It's just me and my students
Do you
at
think
any
that
given
do you
time.
think the fact that everybody on at the publishing house was all somewhat technically literate that you kind of gelled even because of the autism?
Oh, yeah, but that was true for everywhere I did anything with computers or tech. Probably there were other autistic people too, you never know, but um, I, when you're dealing with a special interest,
Hmm.
so autistic autistic life sometimes involves being very, very tunnel vision focused on something.
Hmm.
So writing my C compiler, computers in general was a special interest.
Hmm.
Um,
So, when you were first working for Robert, you contributed articles to the C Users Journal, yes?
Robert had me building walls was the first thing I showed up and they were moving the office and I was building walls and then I needed chiropractic care for about 6 months after that. I wasn't used to being on the floor and hammering walls. And I thought that was great. I remember one time we went to a conference and Robert and I were carrying equipment, computers through
Hmm.
the exhibit area.
Hmm.
And I heard someone go, "That's Leor Zolman. He's carrying monitors." I was like, "Yeah, why not?" But it was, Robert always brought me down to earth, and he's still a really good friend. Um, he just created such a he was such a good leader for that company. I
Hmm.
think at the most we had like 35 employees and whatever, and the tech department was just three people. Robert, me, and Kenji, one of his students from McPherson College, followed him to Lawrence and became. And I was the low man on the totem pole. Robert was the owner of the company. Kenji was the senior
Hmm.
tech department, and I was like just the junior guy the whole 3 years I was there. I loved it.
That's great. So you wrote some articles for the C Users Journal,
I wrote
and
for everything. And they had the C Users Journal, Windows Developers Journal, which you know something about.
yep.
Um, and Sysadmin was the Unix
Oh,
magazine.
okay.
And I wrote all these scripts to sort of make our 386.25 running SCO Xenix useful. Um, and then published articles about them. Like overnight job spooler, the business manager would run these long
Okay.
Informix reports during the day. They'd slow the whole
Okay.
machine down to its knees and it seemed ridiculous. So I just created this script package that she can from a menu say run this one overnight and come in the morning and it's done. And it hasn't slowed everybody down trying to do order entry during the day. And after I had that, I go, oh, I'll write an article about it for sysadmin. And um,
Okay. Okay.
once I wrote a
So,
menu system that was kind of just a nice menu system. The Informix database system had its own internal menu system, and
yeah,
that's what they were using at R&D publications. But it's not the right platform to do a menu system on, a database system. Uh, so I basically wrote a menu compiler that gave the look and feel of what they were doing with the Informix menu system, but it was a compiler and a menu executor, and it ran like 100 times faster.
sure.
Um, and I published the article about it, and then I heard back from a guy at JPL, I think in Houston,
Uh-huh.
that they were using it internally there at
Oh, very
JPL for
good.
their own internal. Yeah,
Very
that was
good.
great. That was great.
So, so that the menu compiler was one of a handful. Robert decided that, or I assume it was Robert decided he wanted to have the publishing company publish a book. And
Books in general. Yeah,
so, so the first book, uh,
I was the guinea pig.
you were the guinea pig.
We took a
And
bunch of articles I wrote for the C Users Journal,
mhm,
and I turned them into a book by writing some connective stuff, and
would it be this
here it
book,
is. Yeah,
Illustrated C?
you went and you bought it before you told me you wanted it because I could have sent you some copies.
Yeah, I was
All right.
gonna try to read. I did read through it really quick. The
Oh,
menu
I
compiler is
would have
pretty cool.
recommended not to read it.
Oh, you know what? I just lost the focus here on the video. Let me pause this. Okay, so you've got a collection of your old articles. You got them, or they may not have been that old. You got them in this book. Um, was the book a big seller?
No, it, I don't think anybody expected it to be a big seller. I sure didn't.
Did it
It was just,
serve its
you know,
purpose and being the first
the
book?
main purpose of that book for me was I wrote a book. Cool. Now I'm an author. Whoopee. Um, I was more proud of the BDSC User's Guide because that was original. I mean, all new
Hmm.
stuff made a contribution. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, the book on the C programs, it was my way of just telling people, here's how C works, here's a bunch of code, and here's what I did, and it's not. I
Okay.
wouldn't recommend anybody read it today.
Okay. Okay. So you wrote for C Users Journal, sysadmin, and you mentioned tech specialist, which evolved into Windows DOS Developers Journal and became Windows Developers Journal, then just Windows Developer. Then it sort of disappeared. But when you were at Windows DOS Journal, some crackpot kept writing in these tech tips for your a column you ran called Tech Tips, and you kept publishing them.
They were
Uh,
good, you know.
well, I just kept sending them in, and you just kept publishing them. I don't know if
I
you
do
tested
actually
them.
remember there was someone that was sending lots of good ones. I remember publishing a bunch from the same person, but I
Hmm.
couldn't tell you what that person's name was. Obviously, it was you.
Yeah,
Um,
this was kind of pre-consumer access to the internet, so this was the only public forum I had, and some of the stuff that I wrote in, other people would write back. I had written a program that would it was like UU encode, but it would encode something so that it could be you could just pipe it through DOS debug and it would decode the whole thing for you. And a gent named Turjay Matheson improved on that twice. Once he put the binaries in base 80 and added support for greater than 64K files. And then his next tech tip, you didn't even need debug anymore. He actually had a text payload that it would generate that was also a valid .com file or exe file or something like that. And so you could just take a text file, snip it right out of your emailer. This was back when emailers didn't have built-in UU decode capabilities. You could just run it and it would it would write the binary file out for you. You didn't even need debug anymore. But that was a lot of fun for me. So I really appreciate you indulging me at the time.
it made the issues more interesting, having your good contributions in there.
So then what kind of led to your desire to move on from that business?
Oh, my wife and I had a plan, that there's a limit to how long we would spend in Kansas.
Okay.
Um, she reminded me that the deal was 5 years, but it actually only went as far as three. And I'd had it, and it was time to just do something different. The editor of the CC++ Users Journal at the time was PJ Plogger, the
Hmm.
Plogger,
Hmm.
and he had a friend at the BU Corporate Education Center and connected me up with them. And that was my first training gig, is to work for the BU Corporate Ed, and started, low on the totem pole again, but I liked doing it. And
What types of subjects did you teach?
oh, I actually was teaching C on my own even before I went out and did the 3 years out in Kansas. So I actually had started teaching before that. Um, I had taught an assembly language class for a computer store in Van Nuys between my freshman and sophomore year at MIT, I think.
Hmm.
Um, at MIT, I taught the high school studies program where I would teach a bunch of high school students that came in on campus on the weekends, which was really interesting. I was in a big lecture hall, and my output was a 9-inch black and white monitor on the table in front of me in the front of the hall. And everybody would come down, and there was like 20 people, 20 kids all crammed around trying to see what was on this monitor. But I think they got something out of it. I just knew from all of that I love to teach. So fast forward, looking for a change of career and just wanted to do something. I knew I didn't want to go and, you know, program for a living, no matter what it was. So I thought, well, software, I still like it. I just don't want to be doing it, but I love talking about it. Why don't I teach it? And so,
Was there a particular teacher that you had that you tried to emulate while you were teaching?
oh, absolutely. As soon as I saw Scott Myers in action as a trainer, I knew I had a long way to go if I wanted to be good. And Scott had been my inspiration, has been my inspiration pretty much my entire career. And then a few other folks along the way as well. Dan Sachs is another good friend and expert He was the secretary of the standards committee, I think, for the first C++98 standardization. And I, I taught his introduction to C++ course um, in my own workshops. And the first time I sort of went in and watched him deliver that course, my jaw was probably hanging down to the floor. I was just amazed at how precise, how efficient, how good he was in explaining stuff. And it's like amazing. And then I saw, Scott Myers later, and he inspired me tremendously too. So those two, in terms of course materials and teaching style, absolutely, were my greatest inspiration. And I always wanted to. I figured if I could be 1/10 as good as Scott Myers, that would be good.
Hmm.
And after 35 years, I think I got reasonable. I got more relaxed, certainly, and toward the end, I was teaching my own material instead of somebody else's, and that always helps a lot. Although
Hmm.
when I taught Scott's, it was wondrous, and Dan's, it was wondrous. But I still preferred after a while, I preferred my own material. It was easier, and I could change it any way I wanted, anytime I felt like it. So
Now,
by
were
the
these
time, toward the end of the career, I got to do my own like modern C++ course, and that was the payoff for all the years of hard work. Is the 10 years I got to to get a lot of work out of that course and have a lot of fun with it.
were these all corporate gigs, or did you teach at colleges, or what type of teaching did you do?
No, pretty much all corporate,
Okay.
either through a middle person. There was a company called Developmentor I worked through a lot.
Oh, sure. Hmm.
And then the last 10, 15 years, pretty much all direct contracts, just because I developed contacts and took advantage of it.
Okay, so that takes us through, like you said, 35 years. Were there any noteworthy points in those 35 years that you want to talk about?
You know, I don't think there's a whole lot there. It was I loved the mercenary aspect of doing these corporate trainings. I also love the travel, which is kind of ironic because being autistic, traditionally travel is hard.
Hmm.
Um, but I discovered, earbuds, noise canceling earbuds back before I had any awareness that that was a common way to get yourself kind of regulated if you're
Hmm.
easily set off. So I enjoyed travel and enjoyed the variety of the different courses I taught and the people I met and the cultures I could take in that I would have never have seen otherwise. And I think that if there was part of the regimen and the travel that was hard, I didn't really let myself dwell on that. Uh, it was too good to be worried about a little bit of effort to travel or, you know,
Sure,
and it was incredibly fulfilling. And there's so many amazing countries I got to visit and be
sure,
treated really well by, all my clients in the various countries.
sure. Okay, so you're coming to what you might see on the horizon as kind of the point in your career where you want to scale down a bit, maybe think about retirement. And that's when you and your daughter, your family had a talk and you began dealing with autism.
Yeah. And it
What?
all happened kind of organically that as I was scaling back the training. I mean, at my busiest, I was maybe doing 30 weeks a year. And most trainings were a week. Yeah, occasionally there were some that were shorter, but most of them were 4 or 5 days.
Mhm.
And 25, 30 of those a year is hard. So by the time I was down to about 12 a year, or so, 10 a year, um, then I started looking long and hard at, I may be ready to hang this up. And that's just around the time I started becoming aware of the ASD through my daughter. And it worked out perfectly because it's hard to focus on this stuff that I was just about to have to focus on
Mhm.
and try to maintain a training career and be professional.
Mhm.
So I found it was harder and harder to really maintain a professional demeanor as I was discovering all this stuff that was like blowing me away about my own brain. So it was hard. And so I pretty much accelerated the retirement plan. And
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So what were some of the first steps that you took in trying to determine how to move forward?
I don't think I really had to think about it. It this what to do just kind of came naturally to me over the years. Like 15 years ago, I started meditating. I didn't really know exactly why it was so helpful. But then after I realized it, then I knew, oh, now I know why I like motorcycles. And I started motorcycling a long time ago because it's riding meditation. You know, when you're on a motorcycle, you've got to be in the here and now, uh, and keep your focus on the present and be mindful and be aware as if your life depends on it. That's a useful exercise. It's a practice. And that's what I use motorcycling for without knowing it. Then I actually learned Vipassana meditation, just specifically the meditation. Then it became clear why the writing was valuable and the meditation itself was valuable too. This is shaking, isn't it? Um, 5, 6 years meditation, and then I ran across something called IFS, internal family systems. It's a therapeutic modality that was great. I learned an awful lot from that, 10 years of that. Um, and then, I was able to see the stuff. You have to understand about trauma. If you have early childhood trauma, your brain learns not to be aware of stuff. There's stuff going on that's really unpleasant, whatever it is. There's lots of different ways that a childhood can be traumatic. But the brain just reaches a point where there's no escape. There's something really intolerable. And so the only way to sort of survive is to pretend that stuff doesn't exist and convince yourself it doesn't exist. And that's what I did apparently. And so 10 years ago, I started to realize I had all these feelings. And it's like I wasn't aware of them before. It took 55 years to get in touch with them again. And so now a lot of my life is being aware, oh, there's a feeling. What's it telling me? Because in the past, I might have the feeling, but incorrectly assume it's a direct reaction to something out there right now. And so if it's something I don't like, I would get mad and think that what I'm feeling is anger about that. No, it's something ancient that got triggered. And now I've confused the past with the present. It's crazy making, kind of literally, but as soon as the awareness comes, now, now I can do something about it. And that's kind of what's going on right now, is catching all these reactions I have that are reactions to things that were, 60 years ago.
Hmm.
And being able to sort of separate out what am I reacting to this now? Am I really feeling something relating to this? Or am I feeling something that was triggered by this, but it's not really this?
Sure. So you're not the
It's
only
been
one
fun.
going through this though, right? I mean, your whole family, is this changing the dynamic of your family? And
Yeah.
is it having any impact on your family life?
It is. It's complicated. But I think the closer I get to peeling away the layers that I had to create to protect myself, right? And finding out who's under there, the easier everything gets. But it's hard. That peeling is difficult. I have to like look at my own beliefs
Hmm.
and see the ones that are just wrong, um, and deal with that. But you pay the price, get through it, and then things start to make more sense. So if things continue to make more sense steadily, that's all I can ask for. And eventually the sort of the emotional stability will follow because I'll really believe that I'm okay, that I'm not in danger, nothing to be afraid of. Because, you know, my parents, my mom was just a nervous wreck, like always, which kind of makes sense given what she'd been through. Um, and my dad, he was like never in a German prison camp, but still had half his family wiped out. So he's going to have some energy on that.
Hmm.
And learning what energy did I get from my mom, what from my dad. I never thought about this my whole life. I had those energies and I just thought they were me. They weren't. So there's a lot to process there.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to say to the viewers?
About about
Any
this,
any subject we've covered, tech, the personal stuff we've just touched on?
not really. not in a not in an instructional frame of mind to tell. I-
Fair enough.
Personally, it's nice to start having things make some sense. Um, I can write a C compiler and I can have a training career and raise a family and have a nice house and all of that, all during which I really don't know what's going on in my own head and how it's all working. So to start to make sense of that, to see where the energy to do things really came from, what I can do now, and really right now, what I can do to maybe help educate, because if I had had some of the information I have now about myself 40 or 50 years ago, it would have made a big difference.
Okay.
So I I want to take opportunities to help get that message out. That was what the VCF talk was really about. And it's why I'm talking about it so much now.
Sure.
It's important to me right now.
Sure. You mentioned the VCF talk, and I didn't acknowledge it at the beginning, but you spoke in May at the Vintage Computer Fair East
It was
at
actually in
length.
April. They posted it in May, but yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'll have the YouTube link for that talk available in the show notes for this episode. So if you find the episode on either straightpointers.com or if you find it at Libsyn or YouTube or in Apple Podcasts, the show notes should have a link to that talk as well. There's some overlap to what we've talked about this evening, but it is well worth watching.
And you can
So,
just Google Leor Zolman VCF East and you'll get it
yep,
immediately too.
yep. Okay. Well, Leor, it's been great having you on. It's nice to finally talk to you after we've corresponded electronically for what, 35 years?
It took me a while to get the timeline straight because you told me you'd submitted all those articles, and you also told me that you interviewed me in your blog
Yeah.
years ago,
Yep.
and I had it backwards. I thought the blog interview happened way, way back, and then later on you submitted art, but no, it's actually you submitted stuff to the Windows Developers Journal first, and then that article. I guess it was a written interview, like you emailed me questions and I answered
Yeah,
them or something.
yeah, it was an email
Something like
interview
that.
and I'd published
Yeah.
it on my blog and I had since taken it down. And I find this kind of funny when w- uh through happenstance I remembered your name. I was looking at one of my old articles and I thought, well, he'd be a good guest for the podcast. I wonder if his email address is still the same because I remembered it. I looked for your email address. I Googled it and I saw whatever about the third link it says from some classic computing site. I can always be reached at, and then there was an email address there. Well, that's the one I remember. So I shot you an email and you responded. When I went back and looked at that link, it was my interview that they were hosting, and it was back from 1999. So I used a 26-year-old document as a reference. Oh, yeah, this must be his current email address. So it was just luck on my part that that hadn't changed and that I was able to get a hold of you.
I wish I had thought of registering Leor.com, back when
Yeah.
I had that opportunity.
Is it taken?
Oh, by now, yeah.
You sure?
When I finally thought of it, of course it was taken, yeah.
Sure.
What four-letter combination.com isn't taken? Is there any?
Um it depends. I had a
Somebody
.us
will have
site.
poached it to try to sell it to somebody who really needs it. So,
This is true. This is true. Although I just got doswizard.com. You think somebody would have taken doswizard.com at some point. Maybe nobody cares about MS-DOS as much as I do, and they just don't care. So, Leor, thank you again for your time. It was good having you on the show.
thank you for asking me. It was a treat to be asked to do an interview. Thank
Have a
you.
good one. Thank you all for watching today's show. Let's do this again soon. Take care.